So Biden was asked when he got off the chopper whether or not, what with the wake of Alexei Navalny's death, and he goes, "Well, we're considering additional sanctions." I wonder what sanctions those would be, because they basically made it easier for Russian lobbyists like Fusion GPS and Natalia Veselitskaya to lobby against the lobby for the repeal of the Magnitsky Act, which punished those oligarchs. Welcome back to the program. Dana Loesch with you, bottom of the second hour. You can listen coast to coast. We also have Facebook, YouTube as well, and I believe the video portion of the radio program, the live stream, is back up. We've been fighting with YouTube. It's a long story. Anyway, so speaking of the Navalny thing, I ran across a really good editorial that is over at European Conservative, and it gets into Russia's Christian dissidents. And it's really insightful. It's a piece that's written by Jonathan Van Maren, and he discusses how essentially Alexei Navalny was a Christian, and he had written about his Christian faith previously, and how it had informed him in his positions and led him on the path that he had taken. And this plays in the face of Putin's seeming embrace of traditional values and faith. Because as Marin notes in his piece, Putin tries to appeal to these traditional values of people in the West, but he uses an establishment, an orthodox establishment that hides his corruption. In fact, as Andrew Walker put it, the Orthodox establishment placed chaplain to his corruption, which I thought was a very good way of saying it. But this piece is interesting because I've noticed this increase in sentiment with some on the right, not all, very few, but some. And it's enough that the media has taken notice, and they want to make these few look like the de facto representation of sentiment towards Putin on the right, which again is misleading, but purposefully so, because they're trying to leverage everything that they can to help Biden in the elections. Now, let's ignore the fact that the previous, DNC just an election ago literally worked with the Kremlin to try to rob America of a free and fair election in 2016, but whatever. But this piece is interesting, and I wanted to read this portion to you, because keep this in mind as you hear people try to romanticize what they think, Putin doesn't, he embraces traditional values and all of this other stuff. The piece from Van Maren goes, despite all of this, Vladimir Putin has gained fans in the West who see him as a defender of Christianity. It has been utterly bizarre, Van Maren writes, to watch this unfold, not least because Putin is following the oldest propaganda trick in the book, portraying himself as a defender of traditional values against Western decadence in order to deflect criticism from an oppressive regime maintained by murder, censorship, mass arrests, a rigged judiciary, and faux elections. Van Maren notes, as he's written before, Zimbabwean dictator Robert Mugabe utilized rape, death, and death squads and tortured and controlled his subjects. He famously condemned the LGBT movement at the UN in defense of quote-unquote traditional values. Libyan strongman Muammar Gaddafi vocally opposed homosexuality at the African Union while running covert rape rooms and forced abortion chambers. There's dozens of other examples out there, by the way. I mean, you could look down at North Korea's leadership. All you have to do is look over at Xi Jinping, which Van Maren also notes, that Xi Jinping is doing this exact same playbook. The exact same playbook that Putin is using right now, Xi Jinping is using. Cracking down on the LGBT movement, Van Maren writes, and censoring certain films, citing a defense of traditional Chinese values and a need to combat Western influence. But yet Jinping also presides over the mass persecution of Christians, the murder of dissidents, the genocide against Uyghurs. And in North Korea, where the alphabet lifestyle are presented by state media as a Western corruption, North Korea's Kim Jong-un went so far as to ban mullet hairstyles and skinny jeans with those who repeatedly violate fashion laws sent to the labor camps. All of these leaders see quote-unquote traditional values as an identitarian and political issue, rather than one of biblical piety or religion. That last sentence cannot be overstated enough. And there are enough people out there that are seeing this, and some on the right who believe that politics began the day they were born, are stupid enough and shallow enough to embrace it and act as though that is somehow a legitimate defense of traditional values, or that Putin represents anything that is a traditional value. Define traditional value. That's the question I would like to ask these people. I told you before, a podcaster, a very popular podcaster, a dude, a younger dude on the right, and he never aired this debate that we had. Sat down across from him, and he was telling me, the leader of Hungary is doing these things. Shouldn't we in the United States also be promoting traditional values? And of course, this younger commentator is out there praising Putin right now. And it was at an event. We sat down and we had a back and forth, and they never aired this. And it was one of the first that he did. But he was saying, the leader of Hungary, they're paying people to have more Hungarian babies, and that's what we should do here in the West. And I said, so like welfare? No, not like welfare. Well, in what way is it not like welfare? It's exactly like welfare. How successful has that been here in the United States? Go back and look generationally. We are still doing it. Can you cite for me the success rate? Can you cite for me any sort of evidence of achievement of such a plan that you think would equate to success in Hungary? They couldn't answer. And I see it again with this, people talking about Vladimir Putin. I made mention yesterday, the subway system in Moscow, the one subway, the one little, the big area there that everybody always goes to, was literally designed to appeal to people from the West and try to make them feel bad about where they come from, even though it was designed by people from the West. That very train station, or that very subway station in Moscow, was conceived, designed, and entirely built by Western designers, architects, and laborers that were imported from London by Stalin. And they left the little stuff, like the murals and that, to the actual Soviet workers, because they apparently couldn't trust their own brain trust to do any of this. And then afterwards, they jailed some of the consultants and architects for the accusation that they just simply knew too much about their transit system, and that it then created a national security issue. How convenient. But that's exactly what happened. So they appealed to the West to build something that they could try to then appropriate and say was their own creation, even though they could not have conceived it or built it without the West at all. So capitalism once again prevailed, and right there in the heart of Moscow. That's delicious. And this here, I'm very curious as how anyone can say that Putin is somehow a defender of traditional values when political opponents are poisoned routinely, murdered regularly. And this guy, who apparently has more evidence of his professed faith in his life than Putin ever did, this guy's a Christian, and his life has been dictated by his faith. And yet all the people who are praising Putin's so-called traditional values have nothing to say, really? Maybe one contrived little generic statement, and then it's just back to the way things were. They have nothing else to say. You had an actual Christian dissident speak out and was murdered. These same people sit here and run their mouths about Joel Osteen, but they say nothing about the Orthodox establishment in Russia that give cover to Vladimir Putin. I just find it fascinating how much certain people will overlook. Wouldn't it be cool to sit here and act as though anything that Putin or Russia did is in any way greater than what the United States has done, or that somehow, yes, we have our problems in the United States, but if you wanted to have a phallus measuring contest about a laundry list of problems, pretty sure Russia will win that one. I feel like it's a psyop, and I feel like a lot of thirsty influencers out there who are desperately trying to break through a very saturated environment and desperately competing with each other for clicks are trying to outshine one another by seeing who can be edgier. Oh, they found the missing thing with Putin that makes it somehow different than previous praise heaped upon Putin. Oh no, this time it's different because it's more conservative because or it makes sense because it's you, because you have, because what? They can never answer.